4 minutes.
Great.
Sherwin, I'll ask you to mute until your time comes.
I just
Hello? Good day, everyone. It's 12 o'clock in Chicago, broadcasting from the International Trade Center at the Women's Business Development Center in Chicago. We'll give it about 2 more minutes to let the last few attendees come in, and then we'll get started. Good day, everyone. This is Bill McNamara, the Director at International Trade Center at the WBDC. Thanks for joining our webinar today about managing international distributors. Okay, people will be joining us as we go. Greetings to the folks out there that have been on previous webinars, and greetings to people where this is the first time they've joined one of our webinars. Let me do the commercials first, so to speak. I'm based at the Women's Business Development Center in Chicago on Michigan Avenue. And the Women's Business Development Center is a very well-known, well-established nonprofit that's a leader in the field of women's economic development. And it's branches throughout the Midwest and a footprint throughout the Midwest, and with a full slate of programs to help boost the impact of women on the economy with jobs and economic growth and building communities. So at the Women's Business Development Center, we've got other departments. We have a small business development center. So this is, I handle the international part. We can help you also with industry research, business plan analysis for your business in general. And we've got what's called a PTAC, which is focused on government sales. And if you're interested in selling to government, we've got a whole a department and programming to address helping you sell to, for example, the city of Chicago, the county of Cook, the state of Illinois, the federal government. So these programs are available. If you're interested, just go to wbdc.org and see the programs we've got. So I manage the International Trade Center there. And the International Trade Center is just another really item on the menu. So if you need help in terms of getting your business started or financing or branding or marketing, there are programs at the WBDC that helps you with that. If you're interested in exporting, I man the ITC and I can help you talk about exports. So some of the things we can do at the International Trade Center just help you with to figure out, are you ready to export? We can help you develop an export plan. We can talk about channels and markets. We can do market research for you to identify those best countries and markets to go to. We can connect you with international shipping and logistics experts, international payments and banking experts. Just know that we're there as a resource. So you know where to find us, I believe. And if not, we'll let you know at the end. But we're a one-stop shop for your export questions or ongoing advice about exporting, whether you're new to exporting or not, or you're shipping to 10 or 20 countries already and you want to add to that, we're available. And note that the ITC, my client base is both within the WBDC client base, but outside too, throughout the city of Chicago. And actually and elsewhere too. So who am I? I'm basically a private sector guy, 30 years of experience in a lot of different industries. I've lived on different continents. I've worked in 65 different countries. I've got a lot of international export experience. That's what my career has been, small to big companies. I'm based in Chicago, and that's me on a good day. And as well, I can talk to exporting, I think, to a good level. And if I can't, if there's something I don't know, I can connect you with somebody, or I can find somebody that can help. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're just going to overview the topic of international distribution and the issues around that. This is just ideas, tips, and advice on managing international distributors based on my 30+ years of experience doing that. So it's going to be about managing an international distribution network, as well as just managing an international distributor. Maybe you have one. Maybe you have 30 or 50 distributors to manage, and I think the information will be relevant either way. So this is a broad subject. There's no formulas. There's some how-tos. There's a lot of open questions that we're going to talk about, or concepts we'll touch on today. There is no book how to do this. This is just my ideas about how to do it. And there's some pros on this call that would do it, have ideas that would do it differently. And that's okay, right? Whether it's a golf swing or how to bake a cake, people have their own ideas on how to do things. And mine have been developed over those years, and it's worked for me. So I'll refer in this to your product or service being your widget, okay? So that's the language I'll use. And I'll talk about A, B, and C players, meaning the distributors out there. Let's say the distributors in the country of Chile. The A players are the big ones, the successful ones, the strongest ones in the market. The B players are less than that. The C players are, say, just the average players, right? They're A, B, and C players in every market. The players being the distributor, your distributor prospects. And we'll refer to that as we go. So what we're talking about today, the perspective works from small to mid-sized companies. It works in big firms as well. Generally, we're talking about B2B sales. But also we can get into B2C, and we'll get into that a little later. But I've been involved in companies where it was like, okay, start up our international to coming into $500 million companies and managing their international. And these concepts, I think, go across a lot of different companies. And we're talking about global reach because my experience, I've typically been director of international, the head of international. So that's taken me everywhere, whether it's South America or the Middle East or Africa or East Asia or Australia. I've done business there. And so these concepts apply no matter where you go. I'll also, at the end, attempt to assess the pandemic's impact on international business and international distribution. And yeah, if I was an expert on that, I probably would be on TV, right? Not doing this, but we'll give some ideas about that. And we'll also have a guest speaker from the state of Illinois Office of Trade and Investment to just tell us what the state of Illinois can do to help your exports, and talk about the state of Illinois I-STEP grant program. So know that the state of Illinois supports exports, and there are a lot of assets and resources in place to help with your exports. And we'll talk about that. And I-STEP is a grant, free money for exporters. So we'll get into that. So we'll try to go for about an hour. We'll have some Q&A. If we miss out on all the Q&A at the end, I can follow up with you because I'm able, I'm able to find if you put something in and follow up. So we'll try to answer everything. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to minimize myself because I expect we're going to have 40 or 45 people on this call. And rather than me talking in a seminar, I'm going to sit back and relax like I'm sitting across from you in a bar or a restaurant and just talking about international distribution. So I think it'll be just a better way, a more relaxed way to go about it, and just getting into examples and anecdotes that I think will be useful. So going forward, the assumptions we're making today are, okay, you're a US company. You have limited resources. The days of having squadrons of assistants are long gone, right? You're, limited resources, limited time, limited money, limited help. So we're going to also try to piggyback on whatever the company is doing in the US market, whether sales or marketing programs, whatever. We're going to try to utilize whatever's being done on the US side and use and adapt as needed for international. We're going to assume your business is already established. International and exporting is not a great place to start your business, right? So we're going to assume you're already up and running in the US. We're going to assume you have a competitive product in the US market. We're going to assume you have a differentiation, a story to tell about that product. We know how you compete. You know how you compete. We're going to assume that your US competitors or your US customers might be overseas as well. We're going to assume that international distributors can be different from what you find in the USA. For example, I put WWG there. WW Grainger is a gigantic industrial supply distributor in the US. And you know what? Industrial supply doesn't look like WW Grainger most places, or in a lot of places overseas. And I think we'll, in general, make that assumption for international distribution. Looks different than what you may see in the US. And you also understand the benefit of going international. You understand that it diversifies your business, therefore reducing your risk, increases your scale, and it provides your opportunity for growth and profit. You understand that it's a good idea. And that's why many companies export. Okay, and off we go. So why use distributors? Okay, so we're talking about that company you sell to in Colombia or Dubai or Australia or South Africa or Japan, who buys your product and resells it to their customers in country. They have local knowledge. They have the relationships more than you. They have feet on the street. They know the market. They sell. They have salesmen out knocking on doors every day. Distributors, their job is to hold stock. Okay, so your product is in their warehouse. They're out selling, and they can fill orders quickly from their local stock that's held. They know the local language. How's your Japanese, your Arabic, etc. Right? They know the local culture. Things that it's difficult on if you're sure it's easy. It's not easy. If you're selling in 30 countries, it's hard to know 30 language and 30 local cultures, right? So you rely on your distribution to help you with that. They do local marketing. They'll do local trade shows. They'll do local advertising, local social media. They'll promote your product in the language and in the ways that the local market reacts to and accepts. They'll handle payment for you. They'll provide credit for you in that local market. You're selling to the government of Saudi Arabia? Are you ready to give the government of Saudi Arabia credit where they demand 120 days to pay, and the price of oil goes down to $30 a barrel, and they decide to put another 120 days on that? Are you ready for that? Not necessarily, but your distributor is familiar with that situation and can navigate that. And your distributor handling local credit and knows who's creditworthy, who has money, who doesn't, is very important, useful for you. They can handle after sales service and support. So you're selling pumps, and one of your pump fails, or one of your pumps wasn't installed correctly, and it fails. Your local distributor goes to your end user, swaps it out, replaces it that day, takes the failed one back to the office, sends some photos back to you, and then you figure out whether you credited for them or not, right? So they can handle that local after sales service and support that can be difficult from 12 time zones and 7,000 miles away. And they know local regulations, right? They know the import process. Your product gets caught in Colombian customs because somebody didn't properly fill out some paperwork. Do you know how to get your product out of the Colombian customs? You may, but your local distributor probably knows the process and the people and has the ability to get that product out of customs and into the country better than you. That's why you use local distributors, people on the ground in market that know how to operate. So let's briefly we're talking about market entry and channel strategy. So distribution is a good idea, but it's not, there's downsides to it, right? It's a bit of a trade-off. And I'll just look at distribution means using intermediaries, the bottom there. And the bottom right are the cons of distribution. You know what? You're dependent on that distributor to handle your business in that market. And you just don't have direct end user contact. That's what the distributor tries to own. So that's a downside. That's a downside of it that you try to manage around. So let's move into the step before distribution is you're approaching the market, right? You've been through the process, you've chosen target countries, and now you need to find distributors. And to me, the key is segmentation, segmenting the market. And you can segment the market a lot of different ways. Segmenting the market means cutting up the market so you can understand it and find a channel to address that part of the market. So for example, let's say you can segment a market by geography. So you'll look at the Mexican market, you can cut it up with, say, by the Mexico City market, the Guadalajara and area market, and the Monterrey market. That's 3 good ways to start to cover the Mexican market. You can cut up a market, let's say let's say you're selling valves, and you can cut up the market by industrial and commercial and government use, or typically, let's say industrial commercial. You can sell your valves to factories. You can sell your valves in commercial market to office buildings too, because they all may use a hot water heater valve. So there's a way to cut up your market, and then you find channels to get to each of those. And within the industries and commercial markets, there's subsegments, right? So an industry can get cut up into, for example, you can find energy markets, refineries, and oil markets. It can be a pharma market, it can be a steel market. Commercial markets can get cut up too into hospitality, for example, education and office, hospitality, hotel markets, education, schools and universities, offices, the office market, right? So there's different ways, and there's different channels that can address each of those segments. You can cut up the market by price. You can go for the low price market, you can go for the mass market, you can go for the premium high-end market, and address your channel to cover each of those segments or the best segment for you. Back in the day, I sold the warning lights that went on vehicles, you know, the red lights, the yellow lights, the blue lights. All right, so we had to cut up the market by end user, the fire departments, police departments, and safety/tow truck markets, and find channels to address each of those. So there's, again, different ways. You may cut up the market just by channel. Go to market through distribution. You might go to market direct. You might use e-commerce. You might go to market through retail, the Walgreens and the Home Depots of the world. So there's tons of ways. There's many ways to cut up a market. The key is cut up the market. Try to get it into more manageable pieces, segments. try to cover what you can of the market and find a channel to reach that segment. But let's talk about this. You can't have perfect coverage, and it's difficult to cover 100% of the market, all the geographies, all the segments. You don't want to get greedy and try to get to that, because too many distributors is counterproductive. Why is that? Let's say we've got a market let's say we're trying to get into Thailand, and let's say we're trying to get it to cover the Bangkok market, and we put 4 distributors into that market, and we have 4 distributors set up to cover Bangkok for us, and we give them all the same price. They're all going to buy your widget for $100 each and going to resell it for $150 each. And let's say one of those distributors gets on board with you. They're really raring to go. They're very motivated. They do some advertising for you. They hire an extra salesperson just to sell your product, and they get a booth for your product in a local trade show. Well, their cost just went up, right? So rather than now selling for $150, they're selling for $160. And somebody in there, so the word's getting out about your product in the Bangkok market. Somebody Googles your product brand name, and they see 3 distributors. Well, guess what? Those other 2 haven't invested. They're still selling for $150. Your distributor who invested is now selling for $160. Who gets the sale? The $150, right? Too many distributors can create that kind of conflict and create that kind of disincentive to do anything. So you've got to find a way to have enough there to make an incentive for them, and try to reduce, but not eliminate, but reduce channel conflict as much as you can. So you want the least. My philosophy has been the least amount to cover the most of what I need covered. Less is better. If I can cover 70% of the market with 1 distributor and 80% of the market with 2, I'd go with 1, because there's more pie for that 1 distributor. There's more incentive for that guy. That's how I looked at it. And again, this is a gray area. This is sort of art, right? That it's hard to say what's best. Another question is, can 1 distributor cover the market? Well, it depends on the market. But to me, some markets are regions. Some markets, it's very difficult. A place like China or Mexico, these are big markets. It's rare for 1 company to cover it all well. Now, a distributor might tell you, sure, we cover the whole Mexican market. Yeah, we cover Monterrey, we cover Guadalajara. How do they cover Monterrey? Do they have an office there and a warehouse and 5 salespeople? Or do they send a truck up there, a guy up there once a month to make the rounds? So how do they cover? And I found, for me, it's rare for 1 company to be able to cover those big markets well. I think the realization is it's a multi-channel world, right? So you've got, again, different segments, so different channels to cover different markets and try to minimize the overlap. I'll say, in terms of this whole coverage versus channel conflict versus resources question, where you got to balance things out, that I've come across sloppy distribution. I'll give you an example of that. Is I worked for a company where we had 60% market share in the US, and they brought me into so a good product, but they had no international. All right, build us an international business. So in this case, going to Chile, and our main competitor was a European company in Chile. Chile's about 150 miles wide by, I don't know, 1,500 miles long, right? And about 75% of the economic activity in Chile happens in the capital region of Santiago. So my established competitor had 8 distributors in Chile. Well, guess what? 8 distributors in Chile is probably too much. And all 8 of those were not happy. So how did I enter the Chilean market? How did I attack sloppy distribution? And the reason I say Europeans here is because my belief is, okay, countries are good at certain things, right? Americans are good at, say, software. Americans are also good at, like, air conditioning and refrigeration. And I believe Americans are good at distribution, and Europeans aren't. Europeans can be good at luxury goods, other things, but to me, they just don't sort of get distribution. So in this case, in Chile, this German company went down to there and set up 8 distributors. Nobody was happy, fight each other, too many of them, cut in price, nobody won. So I looked at the 8 of them, I picked the biggest one, and I went to them and I said, hey, in this case, Mrs. Distributor, How about I come in, you cover the market, you meet these numbers, let's agree on these numbers. You do that. I only need you handle that for me. I only need one distributor. It's all yours. You don't have to fight, and you don't have to fight my brand every day like you're doing today. Well, what they do? They flipped. They flipped to my brand. So attacking, that's an example of attacking sloppy distribution. Army of one, that's the resource part, right? Like, in my case, I've been in situations where I had a team of salespeople. I had a sales guy in the Middle East and salespeople in Europe and salespeople in Asia. And then I've been in situations where it was just me and I had the whole world was my responsibility. And what's your bandwidth? Can you, how many, and a couple of assistants, of course, but how many distributors could I actually manage? I don't know, maybe 40. And so what good is it for me to put on 10 distributors to cover every niche and corner of the Mexican market where at some point I ran out of bandwidth, right? So that too, sure, I can set up 10 in Mexico and 10 in Colombia and 10 in France and 10 in Germany, and then I run out of bandwidth because it's just me. An issue. Okay, so let's just talk about what those distributors look like. Just some thoughts on that. Okay, who do I pick? Who am I going to work with? You work with the best available that you can find, right? I had a product line that I was working with, and that I was like, okay, we've got a good market share in the U.S. Take us overseas. The company had never been to the Middle East before, and so you're looking for the best you can find. Maybe you get a great distributor, maybe you get a good distributor, maybe you just get a mediocre distributor. In this case, showed up and went to the Saudi market, Saudi Arabian market, and all my competitors got there 25 years ago. All the good distributors, all the A players were locked up. And in that case, and the B players were locked up too. So it was pretty hard to find a good. You just do the best you can in a market like that, get the best guy you can get. And there's only a limited number of good options in each market. Qualifying what partner to work with. Do they have money? Do they have money? Show me the money. Talk is cheap. If they don't have money, they can't show you they have money somehow. Financial references or references through other lines that they represent, that doesn't do you much good. Do they have conflicts? Are they carrying a competitor? There's ways for you to find out that, right? You can ask them. You need to do your due diligence when you sign up a distributor, of course, and you can do it yourself. And there's vendors that can do the work for you. And for, I don't know, $400 or $500, they can do a real deep dive on this particular company and let you know, some more about them. Which partner do you sign up and work with in a country? What distributor do you work with? Not necessarily the first one you meet in that country, not the one that walks up at the U.S. trade show and wants to represent you in that country. So let's go back to let's say that Saudi Arabia example, where all the A and the B players were taken. So what do? Do I look for the C player who's experienced in my field? And for example, let's say in this case, just for an example, let's say I'm selling mops, right? And and my A and B players are all taken in Saudi Arabia. Maybe I find, and I've done this, a good business, a good company that makes buckets but doesn't have mops. And the good news is they go to all the same places I need to go. The bad news is they don't know anything about my products. So do I go with the C player in my field, or do I go with the A player where I got to teach them everything? And there's an education, there's a learning curve, there's a trade-off, and it's going to take time. That's a decision to make. You can go either way. Do you work with a big company? Do you work with a little company? Trade-off again. With the little one, you get focus, communication. So with the big one, you get a lot of resource, maybe less focus on your brand. To be figured out. Finally, you get to that point of selecting distributors before you're managing them, that remember your product has value no matter who you're dealing with. You're interviewing them to handle your products like you would interview somebody for a job. Don't be meek. You have the right to be there no matter how big they are and no matter how small you are. Interview them. You have the right, you have value. Get inside their business and understand what they can do for you. What are the common expectations? What do you want from them? What do they want from you? Get that out on the table. Seek relationships, not necessarily deals. Okay, we'll talk more about that later. You're selling yourself and your company to that distributor. Show them how you can help them make money. That's how you get their attention. That's how you get attention of the A players, of the big companies. Show them how, get inside their business and show them how you can help them make money. And at that point, before you sign up, get their commitment now on their investment. Okay, right before you sign on the dotted line on an agreement or shake hands on an agreement, get that agreement. That's when you've got the most leverage. They're going to add somebody to handle your product line. They're going to do the translations of all your literature. They're going to get trained to handle support. They're going to take in stock inventory levels. That's the time to get that commitment. And you sign a contract. Well, this is where I go off the book, right? And there'll be some pros on this call to say, of course, all the time. And certainly a lawyer is going to say, of course, all the time. You know what? I use contracts sometimes I didn't. They can be helpful, but they can hinder the business too. Note that, of course, everybody knows the US is a litigious society. We have more lawyers per capita than anybody, right? Well, other countries don't operate that way. And when you show up with a 27-page US contract, that's not necessarily received positively, right? You're bringing US culture and behavior to that country. It cannot necessarily be appreciated. So you got to understand that. Yes, the contract can be helpful if the relationship is more complex and there's a investment involved, right? But there was times I didn't use them. That a handshake, if you couldn't back up a handshake, it wasn't worth being in the relationship. Again, a long legal document can be intimidating and slow things down. We were working in Panama once, and there was the A player in Panama that had my competitors' products, and we just kept trying to get in to that company. That was the best company in the market. Panama is not a big place, so there's not a lot of choices. And I had a Latin American sales manager that every time he went down to Central America, stopped by, saw the guy, said hello, dropped something off, maybe tried to take him out to dinner, just kept saying, we're interested when you're ready. And finally, it took a while, a couple of years, our competitor fell down, and he had some quality problems and delivery problems, and this distributor had customers, and he said, okay, I'll give you a try. Well, unfortunately, legal wanted that 27-page document to go down and be signed. That slowed things down. That was, you know how that went over, right? That didn't go over well. And so these are the things that you face, right? If you are going to use that 27-page US contract, adapt it, cut it down, shorten it. What I typically would use was not necessarily a contract. I'd use just a letter of understanding, right? That if you're going to sign something, it's like, this is what I'm going to do. This is what you're going to do. This is, you're going to buy 300,000 this year, 400,000 next year, 500,000 the next year. We're going to send this information. We'll come train you once a year. A letter of understanding was just as effective as a contract. And that's what I would use in lieu of a contract. Because how are you going to enforce a contract? Is it really practical? You've got a contract with your distributor in Bolivia. Is your corporate lawyer going to go down in Bolivia or try to fight a case with a Bolivian company or anywhere else? Just how are you going to enforce? Is it really practical? So getting back to it, to me, it's about understanding and trust more than signing that piece of paper. Exclusivity comes up with contracts, right? And it's the distributor's job to ask for exclusivity. That's just part of what they do. And part of my job was saying, sorry, that word's not in my vocabulary. We don't do exclusive. Let's talk, right? So what do they want? They want an exclusive because distrust is in their DNA, right? They've been burned by other manufacturers that have the distributor has built up good business, and the manufacturer has added other distributors or gone around them or something like that. So you've got to develop trust, and that takes time. My case, again, I would rather not have exclusivity. Let's just get down to it. And I would tell them my philosophy, like, hey, less is more. I don't need 8 distributors in this market. If you can do this job, you're all I need. We don't need an exclusive. Exclusives can work against you because if somebody locks up your line, they can jack up the price and do whatever they want. You've got some parts of the world where a distributor may lock up your line and just collect your brand and sit on it because maybe your product has some kind of conflict with the extension of some product that they carry already, and they want to minimize that competition that might come in. So they'll just sit on your brand. That happens. That's another reason I don't like exclusives. but regulations may require it. Some countries in the Middle East, you have to sign an exclusive agreement. If so, tie it to performance once again and leave yourself an out. 300,000 this year, 400,000 in purchases next year, 500,000 the year after, that type of thing. Exclusivity should go both ways. So they can't pick up, they can't represent a competitor of yours either. So it can work. It can develop a high level of commitment and cooperation. And in some markets, they're hard to segment. You have a Singapore distributor, whether you talk about exclusivity or not, he's probably an exclusive because there's no room for two distributors in a market like that. And one other thing, let's talk about just a different structure. We're talking about distributors, but let's talk about as an option using agents or manufacturers reps. Manufacturers reps are something you find, they're pretty common in the US, but you don't see a lot of them overseas. What a manufacturer's rep is you pay an agent in the country a commission on sales in that region. So I had a manufacturer's rep say in Korea, and we paid him 5% of whatever went into Korea. He acted as our sales manager in Korea. So if we sold $1 million, we paid him $50,000 over a course of a year. So you may or may not use a rep with distributors. In this case, in Korea, he managed the distribution network. And as we got further into the market and we found, okay, we need to expand geographically to this region, he'd go find that distributor, put him on, we talk about him, we'd agree that that distributor was appropriate, and then he gets the 5% on all the sales that went into that distributor. So you can use an agent to orchestrate things with your distributors and manage. You can use an agent or a manufacturer's rep to orchestrate your business, direct sales to users as well. So how I use them, and I did use them as much as I could, I use them as my outsourced sales manager in a country or region. I had them in Australia, I had them in Mexico, I had them in Korea, I had them in the Middle East. Used outsourced, commissioned salespeople to manage the business. And it gets back to that resource issue, right? It was just me. How am I going to manage 5 more distributors in Australia, 5 more distributors in Korea? I needed to outsource the work, so I did, and these reps did a great job for me. That local rep has local knowledge, and it's low risk. You only pay on sales. You're not paying him he's not an employee. He's an independent contractor, and he's only paid when that 100,000 is paid, goes into that market. You pay him the percent, could be 5 to 10%. So it's hard to find them. And you can find them in Canada, you can find them in the Caribbean. The farther you get from America, the harder it is to find. Sometimes I've sort of invented them. Like this guy in Korea, he was the salesman of the year in my distributor. And we got to a point where, he was so good and he was doing 70% of the sales himself into this country. We approached the distributor and him like, hey, how about set him up as a rep? And hey, Mr. Distributor, it's no risk here. He's off your payroll, and all the sales will go through you, and all the sales he grows, and he's going to be dedicated to our product line, will come through you. So the distributor was fine for it. The salesman turned into our manufacturer's agent was fine with it. So it worked for everybody, and our sales increased. More channel options, right? So you can sell direct. And that there's places it's best to sell direct, right? If there's a limited or a handful of customers worldwide, that's easy. What happens if, okay, I'm selling to Australia and I have 1,000 orders going into Australia? Well, if you've got 1,000 orders and you're selling direct to Australia, you got 1,000 orders, 1,000 sets of documentation to prepare, and 1,000 shipments going to 1,000 customers and looking for 1,000 payments, right? Or in that case, distribution may be better, 1 order, 1 shipment, and they'll fulfill the orders. E-commerce, there's a lot involved. Again, a typical channel option to distribution. E-commerce could be part of that. There's a lot involved, right? Resources and pricing and after sales, complex topic. But you can use distribution with e-commerce, right? For example, you can promote sales and have sales on your website, and your local distribution in that country could be sitting on stock and fulfill your orders. And you ship over by the container, and he'll sell the orders or fulfill the order. So there's ways to do it with distribution. E-commerce doesn't eliminate distribution. We're going to talk about this more on a webinar, May 17th and 24th. So if you're in on this, webinar, you'll get the news about that international e-commerce and social media, and we can get into this more. Finally, there's another option called an export management company. This was more that was used like in the 60s and 70s when mid-sized businesses didn't export themselves. So there was just what called these export management companies. They would buy your products, and they would be like in a category, like they'd be strong in healthcare, and they go to 10 mid-sized or small companies, buy their products and resell them overseas. And these companies are still around, and in some ways they're effective. They're sort of the old way of doing things, but there's still some value there because some people are still using them. So an EMC is another option, or you may just use all these at once, right? You might have distribution someplace. You might sell direct over here. You might use an export management company that handle South America for you, a hybrid. Let's get into concepts, right? Managing international distributors, concepts, position for the long term. Long term, there will be ups and downs of markets, currencies, and economies. Communicate and know yourself to your both that everybody's in this for the long term. Be flexible. International business is more give and take. Everything's negotiable. Pricing, terms, shipping, volumes. Internationals is more flexible in domestic business. And I was talking to one of my companies I work with the other day, and they're like, you know what, selling that to our upper management is going to be tough. You know what, international business, international sales, part of what you're doing is educating your own company and typically upper management about international business. And the message is it's different out there. So we have to be flexible. We have to be adaptable to our international business. That's just the way it's done. So that's part of your job is to globalize your company as well. Relationships, emphasize relationships. Stress you want to work with people over the long term. Relationships in international business are more important than they are in the US. US business is just culturally more transactional, and international business in many cases is more relationships based. And so the long term and the relationships fit together. Concepts about international distribution, leverage. But you know what? Friendship is not going to sell alone, right? You're accountable for numbers, and your boss wants you to sell a particular amount, and you've got some work to do. And the relationships are important. That'll help you with that, but it's not alone. You've got to keep in mind leverage. And in terms of how you're managing day to day, I'd say never forget about leverage. There's only so much margin to be had, right? So let's say in this example, you make a product for 50, you sell it to your international distributor, he buys it from you for 100, and he resells it for 150. So now let's say that 100 figure is that's where the tug of war takes place. It's either your money out of your pocket or money out of theirs, right? And this is where the negotiation comes into place. He's going to ask for a discount. He's going, oh, can I buy for $95? You got to push back when you get, oh, hey, I'm doing this trade show locally. Will you help me with this local trade show? Your answer is, unless you want to take more out of your margin, you know what, you handle local trade shows and we'll handle the regional trade shows. Or, yeah, I can go down to 95. If your normal $20,000 order, you bump it up to 50,000, I can go down to $95. Never forget about that leverage. It's back and forth. It's a never-ending tug of war. And just be aware when you do have leverage, when you do have leverage, keep in mind that you may use it. And again, let's get back to we talked about resources. Do you build a network that's wide with broad coverage? Do you have 10 distributors in Mexico? Or do you have, say, 3 that you work with closely, that you're able to go visit 3 times a year, that develop good relationships with, that you train everybody, that are stocked up? What's better? Hard to say. But part of it is, what do you have the resources to manage? Do you have the time to see 10 people or 3? So that's part of your trade-offs again. Another idea is timeframes are usually take longer internationally, of course. More. So where do I spend my time and resources? It's me and my 3 people, and we've got 30 distributors in 30 countries. Where do I go? Well, the answer is go where the money is. I'd go to New Zealand. New Zealand's a lovely country, and I get there like once every 2 years. And the distributors would say, oh, geez, we'd like to see you, take you out on joint sales calls and do some training. And I'd say, I'd love to come to New Zealand once or twice a year, but I can't. I got to go to Germany. I got to go to Japan. I got to go to Canada. I got to go where the money is. That's it. And they get that. Communicate well. Let me note this, right? That typically you're dealing with different countries, different cultures, and different languages, and a lot of the time the people you're dealing with are English is their second language. And you have to slow down. You have to simplify your language, filter your sentences to make them very simple. Eliminate slang. You've gotta take your time and just think twice about how you're communicating. Try to get to the core meaning of things. Language barriers and cultural issues impede communications. So it's your responsibility to try to improve communications and make that communication channel more effective. And slowing down and simplifying things and filtering your speech is one way to do that. Selling. You need selling in a country. You need to manage. What I found is, let's say a place like Indonesia, it's a developing country. You don't have, it's developing and it's emerging now, and the economy's getting better. And you know what? You're going to go into that market and you'll find a distributor and they'll have 10 salespeople. And you know what? There's not a lot of 40 or 50-year-old salespeople in Indonesia. There's just, it's not a common occupation that somebody would be in 20 or 30 years, right? Because that country is just emerging. Your salespeople are maybe 20, 25, or 30 years old. They don't really have sales training. So you know how they sell? They bring a catalog or bring literature, and it's price-driven order taking. That's just typically how you'll see it. And that's what you've got to train as well, is try to get beyond that price-driven order taking, train people in salesmanship, in selling, teaching the meaning of value versus just low price, because only one guy wins with low price, right? So that's an ongoing issue that with your distributors is just get them to be better salespeople. FX, currency, is a huge factor, huge factor. I always paid attention to dollar against euro, against yen, against RMB versus every other currency, right? You pay attention to the dollar versus the local currency. You pay attention of what the dollar's doing against your competitor. For example, the dollar's weakening against several currencies right now. It's a huge opportunity. Let's say that the dollar over the last 6 months has weakened about, I don't know, 10 or 12% against the Canadian dollar. So guess what? 6 months ago, your widget was $100 in Canada. Today it's 88, and you didn't have to do anything. Guess what? Maybe you're more competitive than you were 6 months ago in Canada. Have a look at Canada. See what you're doing in Canada. Ramp up your activities in Canada. And what happens if your main competitor is European and the euro strengthened 3% against the Canadian dollar during that same time? Guess what? You don't have a 12% advantage. You've got a 15% advantage now. So pay attention to that and respond accordingly. So that's why I say pick your fights. Target where the currency play is to your favor. Target where your competition had a quality failure, or where the salesman in Southeast Asia or Latin America, where relationships are really important. Guess what? The 25-year salesman just retired. You know, there's an opening for you. Go to hot markets in the depths of 2007, 2008, 2009. You know what was going? Saudi, Dubai, the Middle East was still hopping. You go there, right? Go to the hot markets. You pick your fights. You can't be everything to everybody. You can't go everywhere. Pick your fights. Tactically, institute programs. If your domestic sales has buy one, get one for free deals, or buy 10,000 and we'll give you 10% off, institute those programs overseas too. It gives you visibility. It gives you opportunity. Don't let those opportunities go to waste. Of course, you'll have to adapt them probably, but use those US programs if you can. You know, stocking incentives, marketing support that's provided. Use that overseas when you can. Lay out your policies and procedures and manage by exception. So you've got 20 countries, right? And you don't want 20 price lists. You got 20 distributors in 20 countries. You don't want 20 price lists. You don't want 20 different policies. Try to simplify your life. Try to have one price list and then manage by exception. Have a single contact to feed information, meaning, okay, I've got a distributor in Dubai and I met and the agreement was made with the president and there's 50 people in the company and I have a product upgrade or new literature or new pricing. I don't send it to the president. It's like set up that you've got a product manager or a sales manager that's your contact, because the president's not going to handle that day to day, right? He doesn't want to. Just have him set up a person for you, and that's your contact. Training, training, training. It's all there's every time I would, not every time, but most times I visit an overseas distributor, I do a training, either for the salespeople or even the end users. Trade shows are great for meetings. Yeah, these German trade shows, they're gigantic. They're 5 days. They take up 17 halls. I go there for a week. They're world trade shows. I could see 30 distributors from all over the world in a week. So, and I use that. I set up the conferences, and I had one every 2 hours, and it was great. Defend your network for the long term. Let's say the dollar goes up 10%. Uh-oh, you're in trouble. Well, you know what? And your distributors are starting to get jumpy. They're getting nervous. You know what? You might have to cut your margins just to keep things going, because you're there for the long term. He's suffering, you're suffering. Share the pain. You're going to take 10%. He's going to take 10%, or you're going to take 5% less, and he'll take 5% less. You're going to get through it. Stay in touch with your end users. Distributor efforts. Distributors want to keep you away from their end users, because in the past, some people have gone around them to their end users. Well, once they start trusting you, and you want to stay in touch, because you need marketing feedback, and for leverage, right? If at some point in the future he wants there's a disagreement, you've got access to his largest customer that buys your product, you've got some leverage. Reviews, you want to do reviews, right? So periodic reviews with your distribution. Compare your results to agreed upon targets and understand the variances. Review the strategy if it's correct, adjust if not. The question always is, how do we grow? How do we grow? What do you need to do, Mr. Distributor? And what do we need to do to meet our targets to grow our business? Actions for them could be, you add a salesperson, increase your marketing activities, do more advertising, bring in more inventory, come over for factory training, expand from this part of the country to that part of the country. Actions for the manufacturer could be, okay, we'll increase market support. We'll send somebody over here to do some training. We'll change the product to be more suitable to the market. We'll give them a pricing discount. If instead of ordering 30,000, you order 50,000, I'll give you 5 off. That type of thing. These are the type of tactics that you use to move ahead. So you agree on your actions, you agree on your numbers, you hold them for the next review, and everybody's accountable. Okay, sometimes changes need to be made. It doesn't have to be messy. If neither party's making money, it can be mutual. You know what? This is just not working out. Let's move on. Culture. Culture's important. Culture's really important. Cultural literacy, the ability to navigate, can be a competitive factor. Hold on, Sherwin. Give me another 3 minutes. Our Illinois person is I'm gonna run through these so we get to the Illinois part. We're not that far away.
No problem. No
Okay.
problem.
Culture is important, right? The ability to navigate cultures can be a competitive factor. I always thought that okay, I'm a salesperson from Chicago, and my main competitor was a salesperson for a company in Pennsylvania, and that okay, I had distribution in Indonesia or Australia or Chile or South Africa or anywhere else, that if I was more in tune to the culture, that I had an advantage over that Pennsylvania company if he didn't. So I spent a lot of time trying to understand that country and the economics and the social issues and the religious issues of that country. And I felt that was a difference. So when you're traveling, have your cultural antenna up. Sure, Japan's different. You go there and everybody know, you can notice that. But you know what? The UK is different too. I learned that the hard way. Back in my career, I went to the UK, and they speak the same language. It's so different. You know what? It's not. The UK's got a distinct, unique culture that's just as different from us in America as France or Italy is. It's just that they speak English. So you don't make assumptions. Just have your antenna up. Know something about the country. Be aware. And there's ways to become aware, right? If you're ever interested in a deep dive into culture, there's somebody called Hofstadter that did a study on quantitating different cultures. That is what I use. So there are cultural differences. An example, US culture trends to individualism, rules-based, action-oriented, transactions, task-oriented, fast-paced, egalitarian, meaning the boss will sit down with lunch with everybody and let's discuss business. Direct communications, direct feedback. Foreign cultures are different. depending on where they are in the world, they're more relationship based. Reality changes. Like, you know what? That contract doesn't mean that contract that doesn't mean that much to me. Or you know what? The situation's different, so I have to react differently. That's just how different cultures react to things. Different time frames, hierarchies, where the boss would never sit down with the staff for lunch. Group centered rather than individualistic. Different modes of communication. So my advice is be open to the culture, try not to judge it, try not to compare it to the US, and just see it as it is and just take it as it is. Here's an example of cultures that I'm going to skip. It's just high text versus low context cultures. And when I'll send out the slides to everybody, and you can, this is pretty self-explanatory. Pandemic, quickly. So you know what, if I could have a crystal ball, I'd be pretty smart, but this is just my guesses on what's going to be the impact of the pandemic. Business travel and it's going to come back, but predictions are could be 20 to 50% less because a lot of companies got hit hard by the pandemic. They have to cut costs, and travel is an easy place to cut. And climate change, emissions. Hey, Sherwin, if you have to drop off, I'll cover your slides. I know, I do that. So feel free to do what you want, okay?
Appreciate it.
Okay, I'll handle it. So don't feel obligated to do that. And, we try. I'll do better next time. Getting back, so travel.
You did great. I learned a lot.
All right, thanks, Sherwin. There's our Illinois guy, and I'll cover that at the end. Face-to-face is better, of course, right? And it's necessary in sales. But Zoom's here to stay. It's a business tool. Sure, it's better than email and phone, which is how I kept in touch with people. But with Zoom, it could be there could be more contact, more frequency of contact with overseas distributors. There probably will be less trips, but longer trips, right? So you just spend more time because it's less emissions, and you'll rather than going for 10 days, you might go for 14 days on an overseas trip. 2021, what's going to come back? Maybe not a lot. 2022, maybe Australia, New Zealand, Canada, East Asia. 2023, the rest of the world, you'll be able to travel. And you know what? Travel, there's a lot you can do, but you know what? The travel's really important to international sales and distribution and building relationships, right? How do you build trust? How do you build relationships virtually? You can, but it takes a long time. Digital sales calls, that might be worth it, but I'd rather make an in-person sales call, right? Because again, overseas is about relationships and trust, and it's hard to build digitally. So when international travel comes back, it's better. It's better for international business because a lot of business was done on that. Hey, I'd spend a day or two with each distributor, and you get there in the morning and you meet the president, and then the salesman would take you out for joint sales calls, and you're riding shotgun and seeing 2 or 3 of their customers, and they like to so to speak show the flag. If the factory guy shows up and they take the factory guy of this brand that's well known in this field into the customer, that gives them credibility too. Joint sales calls, dinners, informal times. That's when a lot of the brainstorming happens, right? That's when we're sitting around with the after hours, like, what if we do this? Or what if we try that? Or why don't you send this guy over and for factory training? That's where a lot of good business took place. So until we get back to that, we won't be 100% effective in international sales and distribution. Other impacts? Will your distributors feel like they need to keep more stock because supply chains and the problems we've had during the pandemic? Maybe. Shipping is sort of complicated. Well, it's quite complicated now, right? There's a lot of documentation that's required. And as a result of the pandemic, there's been some upgrades to that and some improvements in documentation, more virtual, more electronic documentation. So some things in international trade have gotten better and easier, and I think that's going to improve. Payment systems as well. An LC, a letter of credit, can be quite complicated. Now we're trending towards more electronic versions of payments and letters of credit that are streamlining documentation and payment systems and the logistics and the mechanics of international shipping. So that's good news. And I think that's going to continue. Shorter supply chains, probably. More e-commerce, yes. But again, that doesn't necessarily eliminate distributors. You can use the distribution and e-commerce together. Other ideas, will business travel become more competitive? I'll go back to that example of, okay, I represent my Chicago company. My biggest competitor is that Pennsylvania company, and we've got our distribution or our business in Indonesia or Australia or South Africa. Like, if I show up twice a year and he shows up once a year, who gets the business? Maybe. I think it will be, right. That's human nature. So that's out there. Go where COVID isn't, right? Australia, New Zealand, that could be opening up soon. Southeast Asia, East Asia, Japan, China, Taiwan, Korea. They seem to be getting beyond COVID. They're ahead of us in that. And so that could be what opens up first. That could be where the opportunity is first. Business travel will return sooner in some industries, right? Like manufacturing, having products, needing training, explaining things. Business, that's more conducive to face to face. IT and finance, you can do some of that on Zoom, right? Or more of that on Zoom. So different industries, different pace of return of business travel and face to face meetings. Sooner, sales calls, because you have to have, eventually you've got to have face to face to have more effective sales calls. Later, return of travel, sales meetings. There's going to be less internal meetings. A lot of that can be done on Zoom. Trade shows, that'll probably come back later rather than sooner. Maybe you use hubs to meet, right? Maybe instead of going my Southeast Asia trip, I go to Singapore. And on Monday, I meet my Singapore distribution. Tuesday, I meet my Thai distribution. They fly in. Wednesday, my Malaysia distributors fly in. Thursday, my Indonesian distributors fly in. And until things gets, and I got my vaccination, so I'm good to go, right? So maybe that's what happens. Maybe that's how the short, the medium term is going to work out. I go to Dubai and I have an agreement. You know what? Sorry, we can't travel every place. There's travel restrictions. There's issues. I'll be in Dubai. Let's do the Middle East business in Dubai. Let's do London for Europe. Maybe that's the way we go. Seems to make sense. I think we can assume that China business is going to get disrupted. There's political, there's economic, there's tech issues between China and the US. And I think we can assume that there'll be continued disruption. What's the effect of tariffs going to be? Probably disruptive, right? Hot industries in the future, infrastructure, healthcare, tech, and education. I think that's, there's some consensus about that's where there's going to be money in the short to medium term. Local business conditions. I got a couple slides left. Local business conditions in general. In Latin America, there's a lot of familiarity and respect for US brands, similar standards, but the farther south you go, the less connectivity to US, right? So for example, in Mexico, they use 110 volt products. They measure things by the inch. Central America, the same way. You start getting into Peru or South America further down, the standards sort of flip to European type standards. They flip to metrics. They flip to 240 volt electricals. And so that's the reality of that. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, many similarities, not all similarities, but many overlaps with the US market. All right, that helps. Europe, what I find interesting is, let's say going back a few years, you'd have a German distributor for the German market, and a French distributor for the French market, and a Swedish distributor for the Swedish market. And what's developing is pan-European distribution, where that German distributor may have branches or may have coverage all around Europe. So that's to be sorted through. That's growing. In China and East Asia, references matter. Cold call, forget it. They want to know that, okay, you've got a cosmetics brand, and it's really important, no matter how good it is, no matter what the features and benefits are. What they want to know is, hey, I sell it to Walgreens and CVS in the US. That's what they want to know, the references, right? So that's important. So as you go to East Asia, have your list of references with you. Middle East, it's a great market. What I see is brand collectors a lot of times too. Just there's so much money. There's tradition. Historically, there's been so much money in that market that some of the distributors don't have to work that hard to make money, and they collect brands. So you got to be aware of that. Africa, what I see there is distribution is developing, right? Like if you go to Southeast Asia and you're selling whatever, your widgets, you can find a widget distributor for an industrial market. You can find a widget distributor for the commercial market. In Africa, maybe it didn't, or the sales were done on street stalls or street markets and things like that. But infrastructure is developing. Maybe your distribution, you handle it out of South Africa, and they will handle sub-Saharan Africa for you. That's one way to handle it. Typical, you'd find in the past that distributors in Houston or London would handle the African market, let's say getting into the oil and energy markets. So that was one way things were handled as well. But that local distribution is developing now. So getting to the end, be aware, some final tips, be aware, don't show up on holidays or events, or don't show up during a strike or a coup. Believe me, I've seen it. I've seen salesmen showing up and say, hey, I didn't know it was Ramadan. I didn't know it was Chinese New Year. I've seen it. So look, plan ahead. My experience, try to avoid talking religion and politics in at least initially. What's your value when you show up? When I show up for 2 days with my Singaporean distributor, or my Australian distributor, or my South African distributor, or my Algerian distributor, what's the value? No, the value is, yeah, my product knowledge is helpful. I can talk to them about what salesmanship is and to sell on value. I can help them with ideas and make a strategy. What really helped is the helicopter view. It's like, I don't know the Colombian market. You know the Colombian market, but what I can tell you is what works in Peru. So the Peruvian distributor or the Chilean distributor has the same product line, competes against the same companies, and this is what he did. He did a promotion, or he added a sales, or he tried this, or he tried that, just planting those ideas, that cross fertilization of ideas. Hey, Malaysian distributor, this is what worked in Indonesia. Give it a try. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm telling you, here's some ideas that work. I got the view of the world, and this is what works elsewhere. Some good business is done off hours. That's the informal stuff, right? That's like, okay, you've been out all day, you made sales calls, you did trainings, you're tired. You know what, over dinner, that's when some of these ideas get kicked around, and that's where some of the great solutions or ideas of how to proceed, action items, and the relationships are built. And yeah, we can't do that now, but long term you can. Customer or distributor, just a note on this. I worked for a company that said, hey, those distributors are our customers. The customer's always right. Well, guess what? No, the customer's the user, the distributor's the distributor. It's different perceptions, depending on what label you use, right? To me, the distributor was the partner. It's us together going into the market. It's us together against the competition. You're not my customer. The customers are the ones that's buying from you. And I think that's an important differentiation, an important point. Finally, keep your antenna up. Look for future business development opportunities. Maybe there's an acquisition to be made in that market. You go to the UK enough, you keep your eye out. Maybe there's a competitor that looks interesting, and maybe they're in some distress, or maybe they're the owner is going to retire soon. Maybe there's an acquisition. Maybe if I put it in an office to cover Europe, where would I put it? You're keeping your eye out. Would I put it in the Netherlands? Would I put it in Ireland? Where would I put it? Partners, future partners. You just keep your eye out for that. Finally, commit to your international business. If it's a good idea, focus and apply your resources. There are opportunities out there, and it requires attention. And adapt. Again, it's different out there. Adapt your business, your product, your policies, your style to grow your international business. So what do we do at the ITC? If this sounds good, just keep us in mind. We're your one-stop shop. We're your export resource. Whether you want to start tomorrow or you want to start next year, give us a call, talk about what we can do, and we can start in a year. If you got one question, hey, what do I do with this classification? Or you want to start the whole journey, reach out. So we set a time to talk. We understand your business, right? And the contact info is at the end. I'll leave it up, and you can just jot down my number and give us a call. And what I want to know is, how do you compete? How does your product sell? Let's talk about an export plan. We do the research. We identify 3 to 5 markets. What does that channel look like? What does that customer base look like? Then we work with state or federal agencies, the state of Illinois people, sometimes the U.S. Department of Commerce, to say, okay, we want to go into this market. Can you identify 5 or 6 potential partners, distributors that meet our profile? They'll do the introductions, they'll do the search, and then we get into channel and partner selection. That's where we can help you at our ITC, right? Because that's what I've done for my whole career, and just guide you along that process. And then you get into exporting. And keep in mind that behind the ITC is a whole network of experts. We can connect you with people that know about shipping and payments and compliance and any other issue as you assemble your international team. So remember, there's people to help. And now the Illinois Department of Commerce is part of that team. Sherwin, I think you're gone, right? Yes, he is. So Sherwin was it with the Illinois Department of Commerce, was going to talk about this. Basically, what it's about is the Illinois Department of Commerce is there to help you. There's offices in Chicago with trade specialists, and there's 6 offices overseas. And their job is to help small and medium-sized business export. So that's where the network is: Tokyo, Shanghai, Mexico City, Toronto, Belgium for Europe, and Jerusalem for the Middle East. So there is an international network. They have people on the ground for places where they're not, they'll cover the region, or they know subcontractors that can help you, for example, in Australia. So we can help you connect with the Illinois Global Network. And there's this ISTA program. That's the grants, right? So what they'll do is not necessarily pay for, but they'll subsidize activities. So if you want to go when things get up and running, right, go on a trade mission, or go to a trade show, and it costs you $10,000, you apply for an ISTEP, and they may subsidize you for half of that, $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000. So the money's available, and they want to spend it. So there's lots of things. There's trade missions, individual sales missions, website localization, which can help your e-commerce efforts, certifications if you need to, for example, to get EU certifications to accept, to access European markets. Money's available. So what are some of the requirements for that? You got to be a 1-year Illinois business, fewer than 500 employees. There's your revenue figure. Understand that it's a commitment to export, some content issues, and they want to know you're export ready, and we would help you get ready. So stay tuned. We've got more webinars coming up. Next month is about getting paid, trade finance, credit insurance overseas. May is the international e-commerce and social media. June, we'll talk, what can UPS do for you, right? Like, okay, maybe you're using UPS now, and then you graduate to shipping containers and pallets with a freight forwarder, but UPS has got a small business division that can help with a lot of things. So let's find out what that's about, and more to come. There's my phone number. I'll leave that up. Let me look at some of the, what's the chat? Oh, sorry, Chris, I already handled that. There's the Illinois part. Let me see if I can get into the chat a bit, sorry. Okay, can you share the quantitative culture? Hofstede, Hofstede. This is a guy that did an analysis of all the different cultures, and he quantified it really, that across about 10 or 12 different cultural dimensions, such as communication styles, proximity, where somebody's going to stand next to you, or somebody's going to stand 5 feet away from you, or hierarchy, or a lot of different, that's the place to go for some cultural deep dive. Provide one example about leverage and margin. Well, it's just like their distributor's always going to be asking you for discounts, and or for you to spend money, and you just can't say yes to everything, right? In terms of leverage, let's say your the US dollar goes down 5%. Let's say the US dollar goes down, you notice against that local currency, the US dollar weakens or goes down 7% over the course of 3 or 4 months, which it can, right? You know what? That gives you leverage. Your product is 7% cheaper than it was 6 months ago, just because of the FX rate. Guess what? Using leverage that you've got from that, that's what would seem to be a good time that'd be a good time to implement a 3% price increase, right? So that type of thing. Industry analysis template, reference, or resource. That one, I think the industry analysis is you know what, that's good. The U.S. Department of Commerce has country commercial guides, and there's a lot of research that the U.S. Department of Commerce does specific to country markets and to industries within and across markets. So I think the department and I can help you find those resources. There's a lot of information out there that's free or low cost that's available. Let me see if I can find some of these. And if you know, I'm going to go like another 5 minutes on the chat, and then I'll follow up separately because I can pull all these out. All right. I think if people are, I think we're dropping off. We're down to 25. You know what? I'll follow up with the chats later. I think we're good, folks. There's my information. Feel free. There's email and there's a phone number. I'll leave this last. I got one more slide. I'll leave up for 30 seconds and maybe I won't. Last, my organization would like some feedback. How did you find this webinar? You feel free to provide some feedback there. Thanks for attending. Thanks for some of my regular clients. Thanks for sitting through what you may have heard some of this before. Thanks for the new attendees, and tune into another webinar or reach out and we can talk. I think we'll go from there. Thanks, everybody.